Děkuji. Já myslím, že nejzranitelnější tady v té debatě jsou právě lidi, na které tak často nemyslíme. Když se bavíme o manželství pro všechny, často si představíme, že to jsou ty dospělé páry nebo dospělí lidé, 30-tníci, 40-tníci, kteří žijí v hlavních městech a mají svobodu chodit na pochody hrdosti, ale ta debata se týká mnohem širší části naší populace, zejména pro mě, mladých lidí, kteří jsou formováni v těch prvních letech svého života a pro které je důležité to, v čem vyrůstají, to, co od malička slyší, jestli žijí v zemi, která se jich váží nebo ne. A když se bavíme o dětech, přivádí mě to k Zachovi, protože dopady manželství pro všechny nejsou jenom na LGBT teenagery a mladé lidi, ale zároveň na děti, které jsou vychovávány v duhových rodinách, tedy páry stejného pohlaví, mají patáky nebo dvě mámy. A jak jsem říkala, Zach se jaksi stal slavným díky také tomu, že se veřejně postavil za svou rodinu a vysvětlil národu, proč je to pro ně důležité. A já bych se chtěla zeptat, jak se život jeho rodiny změnil tady po tom vystoupení.
Well, first of all, I'd like to extend my gratitude to our hosts here and the team that has made this event possible. I'd like to thank the supporting MPs and those who are attending and the audience for your interest in this incredibly important topic at this pivotal moment for the Czech Republic. I'm Iowa Senator Zach Wahls. As was mentioned, I rose to prominence when I was only a teenager. I was a student at the University of Iowa studying civil and environmental engineering. I had no plans of becoming an advocate for gay rights. I was trying to become a builder of bridges, literally, not metaphorically, and now here we are. So the state that I live in and now represent as a senator was the third state in America to recognize the equality of marriage for same-sex couples. And when I talk about my family and what this legal decision meant for my family, I often like to share just a very short story about a very practical situation that happened to my family when I was younger, before we had the equality of marriage in our state. My biological mother, Terry, has multiple sclerosis. For those of you who do not know what MS is, it is a neurological condition that affects the nervous system, including the spinal cord. My mother was diagnosed in 2000 when I was only 8 years old, and I watched firsthand as her health declined over the years. Her muscles slowly atrophied, and she also developed a symptom that she refers to as her face pain, this burning or electrical sensation in her skull. And this pain can become so debilitating that her greatest fear is not death, but that this pain might just turn on one night and that it might not turn off. And that fear was quite nearly realized one night in 2006, 3 years before marriage equality became legal in Iowa. I remember very clearly getting home from school. It was a Friday afternoon. I remember walking in through our garage and into the kitchen, and my mother, Jackie, my non-biological mom, was waiting for me, and she says, "Shh." And I asked her, "What's going on?" And she says, "Mom's face pain is back." And the reason she was telling me to quiet down is because what makes this pain worse is sensation. So light, sound, touch, all of this amplify the pain. And so I immediately understood. I was a loud, rambunctious high schooler, so I left and I went to stay with one of my best friends. And when I was over at my friend Nick's house, it was a Friday night, so we ordered pizza, and we watched Lord of the Rings for the 10th time, and played video games, and it was a normal Friday night, but I couldn't shake this feeling about my mother's health. And so I couldn't call home because my parents turned off the phones, because the ringing of the phone would make Carrie's pain worse. So I got on my bicycle and I pedaled home, and I remember slowly opening the front door, trying to be as quiet as possible. And I remember walking back to my parents' bedroom where the door was cracked. and I could hear my mother whimpering in pain. I went to sleep that night. I woke up the next morning, and my parents were gone, and there was a note on the counter that read, "I took Mom to the ER, the emergency room. I will call when I know more. XO, Jackie." And so I immediately checked our voicemail recorder to see if there were any phone calls. There weren't. And so I started making breakfast, waiting to get a phone call. What I didn't know was that my mother, Terry, had almost died that morning. Around 5 o'clock, her face pain had gotten so bad that she was beginning to lose the ability to speak. And that's a very dangerous precipice, because once you lose the ability to speak, it's very difficult to communicate with your doctor. And so Jackie, my non-biological mom, called Terry, Terry's psychologist, or her neurologist, excuse me, and asked what they should do. And he says, "You have to go to the emergency room right away. And Terry needs a high dose of a drug called sulbimedrol, which would help with the pain." They got to the emergency room, and Jackie was trying to explain to the doctor in the emergency room who she was, the conversation that they had had, that Terry had MS and that she was going through one of these episodes. And the doctor wouldn't listen to her. Now, the important thing for you to understand is that my parents had the equivalent of a registered partnership. They had a medical directive on file at the hospital. They had a medical power of attorney. But the doctor did not recognize their relationship. My parents wore rings because they had had a private ceremony. But the state of Iowa that we lived in did not recognize the commitment that they had to each other. And so this doctor, even though we had all of the legal paperwork completed, did not truly recognize the worth, the dignity, the commitment. Whereas if it had been a heterosexual couple and it had been a husband talking about his wife, he would have listened. And so instead of listening to my mother, Jackie, the doctor orders his staff to start running my mother, Terry, through some tests. Now at this point, remember, sensation makes the pain worse. Light, sound, touch. So they start administering, checking her vision, right, trying to check her hearing, to the point that she becomes non-responsive. And so they think that she's having a stroke. And so they order an emergency MRI. MRI machines are very, very loud. And so the pain that my mother went through that evening is the worst pain she's ever experienced in her life. She says today, by a factor of 10. And this is a woman who gave birth to my younger sister by emergency cesarean section without anesthesia. Worse than that by a factor of 10. Not because my parents had failed to fill out the proper paperwork. Not because they had failed to obtain a medical power of attorney. But because at that moment in time, we lived in a state that told couples like my parents, your relationship is not a real relationship. So that's the difference that marriage makes. There is a happy ending to the story, of course. 3 years later, our state legalized marriage equality. And a few years after that, my mother, Terry, broke her arm. And it's kind of a long story, but she wound up in the emergency room. And the treatment that she received 3 years after this, after we had marriage equality in Iowa, the way that my mother, Jackie, was treated in the emergency room was fundamentally different. Because in 2011, the rings on my parents' fingers were not just a personal memento of their commitment. It was a symbol of the recognition that our society bestowed on their relationship. That is why people get married, for the recognition that it provides, not just for themselves, for their family, for their community, for the society. And it affirms our ability as a society to recognize and affirm their dignity and their love. And that's why we're all here today.